Colleen and the Leprechaun. Here we go. What's she gonna find? Looks like she did some traveling, huh? Table of contents. Colleen goes to Ireland. Jack Fox and the Leprechaun in the glossary. Okay, here we go. Ready? Colleen goes to Ireland. Colleen was so excited. She had never been to Ireland before. She had never even been on an airplane. Now she was here, landing in Dublin, Ireland's capital city. Colleen and her parents were visiting her grandparents. She had never met them in person. She had only talked to them on the phone and seen them in family pictures. As Colleen walked out of the airport, two strangers grabbed her and started hugging her. After a few seconds, she realized that they were her grandparents. That must have been weird, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sure she knew that those were her grandparents. Colleen watched out the car window as the family drove by some fields. Her grandpa said mysteriously, "Colleen, be sure to keep an eye out for little people." "Little people?" questioned Colleen. "Who are the little people?" "The little people are fairies," said Grandma as she drove. Tales of the fairies go back to the Celtic times in Ireland and Scotland. We have many legends and stories that all tell about the fairies. "Yes, we do," said Grandpa. "There are many kinds of fairies. A leprechaun is one kind. He looks like a small old man. He's not friendly, lives alone, and spends most of his time making shoes." Colleen had heard about leprechauns before. "One of the great things about leprechauns," continued Grandma, "is that each one keeps a pot of gold." "If you find a leprechaun, don't take your eyes off him," Grandpa warned. "Legend says that if you keep your eyes on him, the leprechaun will have to take you to his treasure," Grandma continued. "A long, long time ago," Grandpa said, "a man named Jack Fox found out that leprechauns could be tricky fellows." "Tell me about Jack Fox," said Colleen. Grandpa began to tell the story. Jack Fox and a Leprechaun. Jack Fox was walking along the road when he heard a sound in the hedgerow. He had a suspicion about what the noise might be, and he started to get very excited. He peeked over the hedge and saw that his suspicions were true. There was a little man wearing a leather apron and a pointed hat. He was using a tiny hammer the size of a pin to shape a tiny golden shoe. Jack knew at once that he had found a leprechaun. Jack crept close to the leprechaun and said good morning to him. The leprechaun smiled and said hello, and offered Jack a drink of water. "Just hand me that bottle," the leprechaun said, hoping Jack would look away. But Jack stared straight at the leprechaun and said, "No, thank you." They talked for a while, and the leprechaun tried many ways to trick Jack into looking away. But Jack wasn't fooled. Jack demanded that the leprechaun take him to the pot of gold. Finally, the leprechaun gave up trying to trick Jack and took him to the field of dandelions. He showed Jack the flower that the treasure was buried under. But Jack did not have a shovel. Jack used one of his socks to cover the dandelion and mark the spot. Then Jack went home to get a shovel. When Jack came back, every dandelion in the field had a sock on it. He never did find that sock that marked the buried pot of gold. Jack carried the socks home and told his wife what happened. She said that at least he would not need new socks for a while. Then they both started laughing. Colleen and her parents laughed too. "Imagine a field full of socks," exclaimed Colleen. "What a funny story." Colleen could see that she was going to like learning about Ireland from her grandparents. This would be a great visit. All right, you guys, I want you to tell about Jack Fox and what the problem was. What problem did Jack Fox have? Right? What was the problem and the solution in this story, Jack Fox? All right? Tell about Jack Fox. Tell about the leprechaun. Who was the good guy? Who was the bad guy in that little mini story? How did the story end? How did the story of Jack Fox resolve itself? All right, that's it. Tadero out.